Instead of paying someone $4,000 to $7,000 to install an underground sprinkler system, a buddy and I decided to do it ourselves for less than $500. What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to DIY Reed. My name is Reed, and if you're new to my channel, please consider subscribing. In this video, we're going to be talking about how we installed an underground sprinkler system at my buddy's house for less than $500. We'll cover how to plan out your setup and the items that you'll need for this. And I want to start off by saying this setup isn't perfect by any means, and it does have its flaws. At the end of the day, it does what my buddy wants it to do, and it waters his lawn and keeps it green throughout the year. And that's pretty much the end goal here, right? To keep your lawn green. Now, there are so many different ways to accomplish this, but we're going to be talking about one of the easiest ways that doesn't require a whole lot of advanced skills. At the very beginning of this, I want to mention when you're ready to dig, you want to be sure that you call your local call before you dig company. I think in Missouri it's 811. I think they should have a website as well. You basically let them know what your address is before you dig. They'll come out and mark the water lines, gas lines, and all your electrical in the ground. So that way you're not going to be digging and electrocuting yourself or hitting a gas line and exploding yourself, all that type of stuff. It's safety first, guys. Once you want to know where all your electrical is and your gas line and your water line and all of that is, you're going to be digging. But before that, you want to plan everything out. Now, we did rent a trencher from Home Depot. I think it was like $200 for half a day. I think it was a little less than that. It really depends on what type of trencher you get, but we rented a trencher and it saved our backs quite a bit from digging with a shovel. So just so you're aware, in the description below, the links to different sprinkler heads, fittings, water lines, and hose in timers, everything, pretty much all the parts that you're going to need, I'll put in the description below, so that way you can check them out. You don't necessarily have to use those links to purchase them, because I realize that you can go to your local Home Depot, Lowe's, Menards, Tractor Supply places. They should have some of this stuff. They may not have specifics, because I know my Home Depot didn't have. I was looking for you guys, and like the T-fitting they didn't have. There's a few things they didn't have specifically that I had to order on Amazon. But I'll have those links down in the description below. And if you're interested in using those links, go ahead, by all means. I appreciate it. But it will list all the stuff that you're really going to need for this. So this is going to be a little bit longer video than my normal ones. Maybe, I don't even know how long it's going to be, but I'm planning on probably more than 10 to 15 minutes. In order to make it easier for you, I'm going to kind of separate it out by steps. Step 1, 2, 3, and maybe 4. So I'll go ahead and I'll put that the chapters down below, or well, actually you'll see them below to go ahead and skip through if you need to. But we'll start with step 1 with the planning. Now, to start this all off, we originally did pick up Rainbird's in-ground automatic sprinkler kit, and it was about $133. This comes with 6 different pop-up rotary sprinkler heads, some line, our poly line, the fittings you need, and 1 hose-in sprinkler, the sprinkler timer that you'll need. Now, we modified this kit to make it work for his house, and we added some things to it. It did add to the price a little bit, but we were under $500 for sure, even renting a trencher. This kit does cover 3,000 square feet with what it has. It just really depends on if your yard can use the 6 rotary pop-ups. Not every yard can use rotary only. We'll cover that a little bit later too. This kit will provide you at least what you need to get going. So like I said, the Rainbird kit does include 6 32SA rotary sprinkler heads, which cover about 19 to 32 feet. And they can go anywhere from I think it's like 25 degrees or something like that, all the way spanning out to 100 or 360. Now, with the water pressure and the water flow that we had to work with, it was more about 20 feet total distance when we had 4 sprinkler heads. And we'll cover that, how you judge for that in a little bit later too. In order for you to better understand how close the sprinkler heads need to be, you're going to need to do a flow test with what the flow is outside at the spigots. So in order to do that, you're going to take a bucket outside that's over a gallon, and you're going to time how long it takes to fill that gallon outside with the faucet wide open. We need to know what the flow rate is for gallons per minute. The formula we're going to use for this is the number of gallons divided by the bucket fill time in seconds times 60, which is going to equal gallons per minute. This number is good to know because each sprinkler head you use, they rate them at GPMs, which is gallons per minute. This is a flow rate for each of the sprinkler heads, and this will tell you, without having to hook them all up, how far away that they're going to spray, as well as how many you can hook up on one zone. Now, the Rainbird kit does recommend for at least 6 gallons per minute. So if you have anything above that, you're going to be good to go at least. 6 gallons per minute is not super high by any means, but if you have anything like 9 or 10 or even higher than that, you're going to be super healthy, and it's going to help you out a lot along the way here. The nice thing is that some of the sprinkler heads have jets that you can change out, so that way you can jet up or jet down depending on what your needs are and what your flow is. So now we know your flow rate, and we need to know where you're going to go ahead and put these sprinkler heads. This will determine how many zones we'll need for each side of the house, and each zone we map out will need to hook up to the hose timer. We went with the Rainbird hose-in timer with 3 different zones for each side, so we had 3 zones on one side and 3 on the other. So we had to add, or not add, but we had to purchase other hose-in timers, which weren't that much more money, so we can get this to work. In the front yard, we used the 32 SA rotary sprinkler heads, about 20 feet apart, and we did the best we could to put them out to cover as much of the front yard as we could. We did some temporary setups to make sure that we were good on the coverage before we started digging. We wanted to make sure that we had the sprinkler heads where we wanted them, so we kind of put them out there and turned on the water and made sure that they covered pretty well. We did have to jet down a little bit because the flow that we had did decrease the distance and the amount of water each sprinkler head was able to spit out. Not a huge deal, but it does limit you just a little. Now, on to planning for the rest. We have the front yard done, well, at least the front right yard now. Now we have to go to 2 more zones on the right side of the house. One is a narrow area, and the other side is the backyard. We did end up doing the zones in the front right and the side and a backyard. And then the other zone, or the other, is going to be basically the whole side of the house on the left-hand side and the front area. Now, on the side of the house, we did end up using 360 pop-up sprinkler heads. Since these use a lot more water and require a large flow rate, we were only able to use 2, and that's really all we needed to get this to work out. On to the next, we ended up using more of the 32A rotary sprinkler heads, and since we used 2 of them instead of 4 of them, we were able to use or get more distance and more flow out of them because of the only 2 that we used. The backyard was easy enough to allow them to do 180-degree swings, so that way it covered the whole backyard with just 2 different rotary sprinklers. Now, the other side of the house was a little bit more difficult because there was a little bit more room to cover, and we weren't going to be able to use the 360 sprinkler heads based on because we only have 3 zones. We probably needed 4, maybe 5, and that just wasn't going to work there. So what we ended up doing there is on the back side we used the rotary sprinkler heads in 3 different zones, 2 on each zone, and we put them out at a 45-degree angle or degree pattern. And so the back side, basically the very back sprinkler was going to cover up to the front sprinkler, and then they just did a 45-degree sweep, as you see here, and then each zone had 2 different sprinkler heads. Now the very front of the yard on the left-hand side, one of them actually goes more than 45 degrees, and that was just so that it can cover the patch by the street and also a little bit more of the yard up on the front, because we had a little bit more, the yard kind of jots out a little bit. All right, step 2. Let's go a little bit more in depth on the planning and install. Like we talked about in the step 1, you want to map out where you think all the sprinkler heads are going to work, as far as what you're going to put out there and where you're going to put them and what sprinklers you're going to use. You want to cover as much lawn as possible. Now, realize that your goal is actually to overlap. This means basically one sprinkler head is going to spray to another sprinkler head, so that way it can water the lawn quickly and make sure it doesn't leave any part of your lawn less watered than the other. Now, at the end of the day, we weren't able to actually accomplish that. A more professional in-ground sprinkler system that's what their goal is, and that's what they want to accomplish. And unfortunately, with what we were working with the sprinkler, well, at least the hose-in timers, and what you're probably going to end up fighting here is you're probably not going to be able to get a perfect coverage sprinkler head to sprinkler head. But we did the best we can, and pretty much all the grass is covered and watered, and that's, at the end of the day, that's what you want. The nice thing about this kit and setup is it uses a 1/2-inch poly line and barb fittings. You'll need different fittings based on your setup. The poly line will run through, from the hose-in timer to each sprinkler, and the poly line easily slides onto the barb fittings, and it doesn't require any clamps or anything like that. The sprinkler heads will connect to the fitting using threads to screw the sprinkler head on. You'll want to use Teflon tape on the threads to seal up the connection. To do that, you're going to wrap the Teflon tape on the threads of the fitting in a clockwise motion a few times. The reason you do it in the clockwise motion is because when you tighten the sprinkler head onto it, it tightens the Teflon tape on there instead of unraveling it. The Teflon tape is going to seal the connection on the threads and not allow any water to go out and leak out. Now, for the sprinkler heads between the last one and your hose-in timer, you'll want to use a T-fitting, and for the very last sprinkler, you'll want to use an L-shaped connector. So that way, at the very end, you're terminating it pretty much. Now, if your application calls for it, you can use a T fitting, or so that way you can tee off the poly line. And we did that in the front yard where we teed off the lines. We ran from the hose in timer and we teed it off. We ran 2 sprinkler heads off the right hand side and 2 off the left hand side. Or you can just do one after another in a line if you want to. So now that you have it all planned out and temporary set up and ready to go and know where you want to put the sprinkler heads, hopefully by now you have the dig company out and paint, or you shouldn't be digging. If you're ready for that, now let's go ahead and start digging. The recommended depth to bury the water line is 8 to 12 inches. Now, if you're not able to do that, get it as deep as possible, because I'm going to tell you right now, when you go to aerate, or a company that professionally aerates, you don't want them damaging any of the lines. Now, you can dig the trenches by hand, or you can use an actual trencher. The trencher is going to be a lot easier to do, and as soon as it rained, it's going to be a lot easier. Now, if you're in the middle of the summer and it hasn't rained forever, it's going to be a lot tougher because the ground's going to be tough and dry. So once you dig all the trenches, you'll want to trench all the way up to the hose in timer for each of your zones. The hose will come out of the ground. You'll want to have that happen right where the hose in timer is, so it just kind of comes right out of the ground, right into the hose in timer for each of the zones. And that way you can just hook them up, and then when you're over the winter, when you want to winterize it and take the timers down, you can just leave those hoses against the foundation. Now that all the lines are ran, you'll want to fill them in with dirt, obviously, and then you're going to probably put some grass seed on there. And now you got a sprinkler system, and it's going to allow it to water it plenty full of water, so that way you can go grass over top of where you dug. At each sprinkler head, you're going to want to try to level these sprinkler heads as level as possible to the ground that it's installed in. The last thing you want to do is have the sprinkler head spraying up in the air or just spraying into the ground. You want it to be level as possible, so that way it sprays as far as it can, as evenly as possible. Once you have the sprinkler heads installed, the trenches filled in, and the hose in timers all ready to go, now the thing that you need to do here is you want to do a test run on each zone so you can make sure that everything is working properly, and make sure that or adjust anything that needs to be adjusted, because you're going to need to adjust the 360 heads, and you're also going to need to adjust the rotor heads to make sure that they're running or they start where they need to and stop where they need to. I'm not going to go full in depth on how to adjust the sprinkler heads, because that will be based on what sprinkler heads you actually choose to get. YouTube is full of these videos for each head and guides on how you can set them up, and you can also use Google too. They're pretty easy to set up, so whatever you need, Google's there and YouTube's there. There's just too many different sprinkler heads out there for this. Step 3, fine-tuning the sprinkler setup. We're almost done, guys. These hose in timers that we set up with Rainbird are easy to set up. They have a large dial and a plus and minus button. On the timer, first you want to set up the current time, because it's going to go off of the time. Then you want to set up how often each zone runs. Usually you want to do every, half inch twice a week. So twice a week you want it to run, or every 3 days, or you can do every other day. And then you're going to want to set up what time each zone starts, and last, how long each zone is going to run. Now, we're going to find that out here in just a second. You'll do this for each zone. The recommended amount of water your grass needs is about a half inch twice a week. And sometimes, like right now, it's 100 degrees outside during the day. You're probably going to go to 3 times a week. How do you know if you're putting down a half inch of water? Well, I'm glad you asked. You'll want to use an empty tuna can and mark a half inch in there. Or you can buy these little measuring cups that I found on Amazon, and you can set them out in your yard. And what you're going to want to do is you're going to run the zone until it fills up to a half inch mark. However long it took you to fill up to half inch mark, that's how long you want to run each zone. Now you can get a little bit better or more technical and put multiple of these around the yard, maybe an area where the sprinkler doesn't overlap. So that way you can make sure that the whole sprinkler zone gets a half inch of water down the ground. Now that you know how long each zone takes to put down half an inch of water, you don't want more than one zone going at a time, and you want to avoid times when your family's going to be using the water like a shower, washing machine, or dishwasher. For the best results, it's better to water early in the morning. I'd say start at 4 a.m., depending on how long the zones have to run for. So in this situation, for us, the front large area on the right-hand side took about an hour and 15 minutes to get down to half inch of water. So we started at 4 a.m., then the side yard took 20 minutes, so we started at 5:15 for that to go. And then the backyard took 45 minutes, and so we started the backyard at 5:35. Now, we could do each side in one day or one morning. However, we decided each timer go on different days. We set them up so that they run twice a week, but started one on one day and the other goes the next day. So that way the sprinklers only ran from 4 a.m. till 6 a.m. because 6 a.m. was about the time when they were going to get up and start taking showers, and we just didn't want that to interrupt it. You'll want to adjust this to what works best for you. I would highly recommend doing it in the morning instead of throughout the day, at midday, like noon or so. I would say anything past 10 a.m. and maybe even noon at the very latest. If you can get water down before then, you're better off. Just remember, at the end of the day, if you're getting ½ inch of water down twice a week, your water's going to be green. Your lawn is going to be the best it can ever be as long as you fertilize it right. Now we're on the last and maybe the best step, right? You're now going to go grab your favorite beverage, sit back, relax, and watch as your lawn is being watered. I know I'm going to get a ton of comments on how we did this wrong and what we did wrong and whatnot. Like I said, this isn't a perfect setup, but it works for us, or works for my buddy. The setup has been running for the last 3 years. Are there spots that get a little bit more water than it needs? Sure. But by the end of the day, for less than $500, that's all it took to do this. And maybe a little bit of hard labor, or maybe easy labor if you're using a trencher. If you found this video helpful, please leave me a like and feel free to ask any questions in the comment section down below. If you're new to my channel, please consider subscribing for more tech reviews, home automation, and home and automotive how-to videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.